AA Beyond Belief is a podcast by, for, and about people who have found a secular path to sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. I hate it when I press the wrong button. There's a big red button that says record, and I somehow missed it and pressed the other button. Anyway, we're recording. And we're live streaming on YouTube. Hey, everybody. So, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the practice of sponsorship and seeking outside professional help. And we're going to also examine whether or not there's a difference between secular AA groups as opposed to AA at large when it comes to sponsorship. It'd be interesting to hear from you. You know, have you sponsored anybody? Do you sponsor anybody? Have you been sponsored? What approach do you take? It'd be fun to talk about that. And also the whole idea of seeking outside professional help. I've certainly done it. And early in my time in AA, I was discouraged from doing just that, which is crazy. So that's something that we can talk about. What has been your experience with that? So, preparing for this, Angela. Hi, by the way. How are you?
I'm good. Rough week, but glad to be here and glad to be chatting with you and being a part of this.
Yeah, so far you've had plague and earthquakes.
Yeah, so, the earthquake. It was rough in the structure that I'm staying in. It was a little more jiggly, I think, than in some places, but still, the last earthquake in Idaho that I've been a part of was in the 1980s, and I don't remember that. So it was just really kind of a WTF to 2020, like really, like, a plague and now an earthquake, and what would have happened if it did, tumble more structures. We can't go to places, stadiums and stuff to gather for safety, and so I got a little annoyed with it, but worked through it, made it through the week, and still sober. So
well, good. I can't really imagine what an earthquake is like. We had one here actually, but it was because in Oklahoma they were fracking, and that causes earthquakes, believe it or not. And we felt it all the way up here. It was really weird. It was like things were shaking, but it wasn't anything like what you had. I mean, it was just kind of minor, but it was kind of strange. The earth shakes. Well, there's 10 people watching the live stream. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope that this is a nice time for us all to get together and talk about sponsorship. Angela, my experience with sponsorship mostly comes from my original early days in AA, I guess. I don't really remember when I first got a sponsor. I think I remember must have been around the 6-month time. My first sponsor I got shortly after I got into the program. I mean, within weeks. But we really didn't do anything together. He just said, John, all you need to do is don't drink and go to meetings. And that's what I did. And I would see him and I would not drink and I'd go to meetings. And that was great. But then after going to meetings for a while, I thought, well, maybe I should really try these steps. And I was trying to figure it out on my own through the big book was what I was using. And it didn't I just couldn't do it. So I finally broke down and got a sponsor then. So I guess that was around the 6-month period. And I went through the steps very slowly. And the way that we did it was the sponsor actually takes you through the steps through the big book. So that was the way that I did it. And that's the way that I sponsored people during my time. Mostly during the first 10 years of my sobriety, I guess, was when I was really actively involved in that type of sponsorship. During the second half or so of my time in traditional AA, I was sponsoring people more and kind of in a similar vein. But since I've been involved in secular AA groups, I've only sponsored one person, and it wasn't really different than what I had done before, other than I don't really have any structure to offer anybody. And what we would do is, there's various books that I would recommend for this person. And eventually what we did is, we just were friends. And the only thing that we really did together was when he shared his 5th step, which was really nice. He just came over to my house and we had a nice conversation. And he talked about really some key moments in his life that he felt impacted his drinking. And so that was really helpful. And And to be honest with you, that's been the extent of my experience. We can go into more detail, I guess, as we get involved in the conversation, especially when it comes to mental health, about some negative experiences I had with it. But overall, my experience really wasn't that bad. What about you? How's your experience been with sponsorship?
It's been pretty significant for my sobriety. When I got in, I was just thinking of this today because I saw in one of my online groups, somebody posted about, if you're 6 months, or what was your first 6 months like? And so reading of some of the other people. And so that reminded me of, what was my first 6 months of sobriety like? And I went to meetings. I went to a lot of meetings. I always shared that I was atheist and didn't know, how I was going to do this, particularly in the first month. Most of the time people were gracious. I got a lot of keep coming back because, I think until you get to the third step, they kind of give you some grace, at least, in my area. But by the third step, you should have something. Anyway, so that's kind of how I went. I looked for a sponsor. I kind of had a temporary one from the first meeting I went to. She just gave me her number. 2 women did, and said, call me tomorrow. And with some slightly codependent tendencies, I'm like, well, if she needs me to call her, then I guess I will. And I went with that for about a month. And then some people pointed me in the direction of a person who they knew was Buddhist. And so I met up with her and started working some steps with her. And we kind of did a hybrid. She was also in the Al-Anon Fellowship. So it was kind of a hybrid AA, Al-Anon, atheist with a Buddhist, kind of tilt to it, I guess. And I had already had the book, the secular or the alternative 12 steps, a secular guide. I had picked it up many years ago and tried to use it at an Overeaters Anonymous meeting I attended, and they weren't too into that, so I stopped going there. Yeah, and they're like, no, not so much. But this sponsor was able to work with me with this book, and so that's how I did it, and it did take a long time for me to go through the steps. It wasn't a back to basics kind of thing. It was probably about a year almost, and that's how I did it the first time. And I kept that sponsor for about 3 years, and then I changed sponsors, and the person I've been with now has been for 10 years, I guess. And I reworked the steps with her, and I still, did them in a secular way. And then I, was sponsoring other people and have since I finished the steps the first time. That's worked out pretty well. I do them mainly with that book, and then, add some other things in that as I learn along the way, and kind of change stuff up, based on, the time we're in and what's working. But that's been my experience. I use the steps for when I, need to, kind of change my perspective. So like, I think last week I mentioned, looking at the 10th step again as a way to restructure myself and get myself kind of in a better place of thinking. And so, that's what I did. But again, the way that I do them is very different for the most part. I mean, it takes the principles of what all the steps are about. But there's no getting down on your knees, none of that kind of stuff. And I try to stay away from the negative language. And particularly in the last, 5 years, I've tried to pay more attention to that, because, I still hear that in traditional meetings, like that we're selfish and self-centered and we need to do this and get rid of our character defects. And I don't, I don't think that I need to get rid of my character defects. I think that those are coping skills, and I think that they still come in handy sometimes. So, like for this Zoom stuff, when I set up my home group Zoom meeting, I have control over it, and I was going through all of the features and stuff, and anything that said allow participants to, I'm like, nope. And I'm like, wow, I'm really strict. But, if it weren't for my control issues, we might have been Zoom bombed or something in our second week of doing Zoom and stuff. But, I pulled my control, character defect or attribute, and that had been in use, and so we were okay. And so then I put it back on the shelf and try to use things in my day-to-day interactions with people that are a bit more healthy and such. So yeah, that's kind of my experience, and then taking people through the steps. I've taken quite a few people. I do sponsor quite a few people. I don't take new people as sponsors anymore, just because of limitations, time limitations, and I do a lot of different service work, and so yeah, I'm taking a couple of people through the steps right now, and they're people who've been sober for at least 2 years. One person for a lot has more time than me, just wanted to do them in a secular way because they didn't know how, was used to the traditional way. And even though they were secular in their, belief system, they didn't quite understand how to make that bridge between the big book and a secular way of doing the steps. And so that's what I do with them now is do that.
Angela, there's a couple of interesting questions that kind of go along with what you were talking about. First of all, one person, Thaisa, she wants a list of some of the books that we use, and I will put those down in there. But the main book that you use is The Alternative 12 Steps: A Secular Guide, and I can't remember the authors, but they're two women.
Yeah, it's Martha Cleveland and Arliss G.
That's right,
and
Arliss G. Martha Cleveland. Yeah, the Alternative 12 Steps.
It went out of publication a while ago, and then Roger C. Was able to buy the rights to it, and so you can get it through the AA Agnostica website.
Yeah. And that book was really ahead of its time because it was written in the 1990s, I guess, and it actually was maybe the first book that I know of anyway that actually reworded the steps, an alternative version of the steps. And that's what Chloe MacArthur, or Chloe M, I should say, is asking. She says she would love to be taken through the steps, but she doesn't have any atheist groups where she lives, and she didn't know about any alternative versions of the steps. She's actually from Vancouver Island, British Columbia. But she was wanting to know, basically, do we have particular steps that we work, and how do we do them?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think we've taken this is what secular AAs do. There's a lot of different versions of the steps. So again, Roger C's AA Agnostica website is excellent for that. There's tons of versions of them, and they're all great and can speak to people in different ways. For me, the Alternative 12 Steps was the only book that had them written in a different way. The first couple of chapters in it even are a little more spiritual than I tend to be. They use more spiritual language. But the rest of the book I really feel like is right on with the kind of secular view that I have.
It's a good book and popular in our group too. I think most of the people I know that work with sponsors have used that book.
Yeah. Because it does give great suggestions and some actual stuff to do, how to, ask yourself questions and write some things down. So I think that's important, and particularly in early sobriety, to start as a practice of being able to do that to help, clear your mind and get clear on what you're actually upset or afraid or worried about, because I know for me early on, I didn't quite know what I was feeling most of the time. It was one of those things, but I didn't know. I even was like in the emergency room, I think my second week, because I thought I was having a heart attack. I didn't know that was, part of, getting sober and stuff, that this horrible feeling that my heart was going to explode. So yeah, that's kind of, one of the reasons why I like it so much, particularly the later chapters, is that, there's some stuff that you can do. As far as, groups that do them, I think that, individual groups, some are into doing the steps, some aren't, some mention them, some don't. It's kind of like with the holding hands, chanting, or, doing, some sort of a secular chant type thing. Some groups do that, some don't. And so it really just kind of varies. And as far as I'm aware, not many groups have taken a stance on whether people should or shouldn't sponsor, or anything like that. That's one of the things I like, is that it just seems a lot more open as to, the path that is best for you to take. And you can kind of move around a little bit and have some space to figure that out. You might start out with a sponsor and then decide that, well, I know that with some people that I've sponsored, things have come up in sponsorship as we started working the fourth step that really needed to be handled by professionals, that needed somebody with a special expertise to walk them through, because they were things that were really, really difficult. And so I always recommend people, if they're able to get a counselor or see a specialist, for addiction or anything else that comes up, because, that's what they're there for. They're trained. We're not trained. We share our experience, how we did it, and, how we know of others who have gotten through different difficulties and stuff, by staying sober, but we're not professionals. And so I think sometimes, that can get either confusing, or, some people forget, what their place is in all of this. Generally, I don't think that it's out of malice. It could be with some people. I think sometimes it happens because someone's trying to be helpful, and then, forget that maybe this is something that the person needs to contact a professional. And then also sometimes sponsorship is like the gateway into getting proper mental health help. It's like, if you start working with a sponsor and are able to develop some trust, then that might make it easier for you to go to a professional, because some people are more fearful of going to a professional for help than they are somebody that's more of a peer with the same addiction or problem.
Well, this is fun. Actually, somebody from Kansas City that goes to my home group is actually listening to the podcast. I can't believe it. Hey, Bree. I like the way that I am observing how sponsorship works at my group, because it's like, it just seems to be something that happens organically. It's not like anybody's pushing it on anybody, like this is what you must do. And we do have a step meeting once a week. It's pretty lightly attended, but most of the time we're not like talking about the steps at our meetings. It's usually some sort of a topic meeting. But if you've been around long enough around AA, you can see the steps in almost anything. And all of the conversations that I see, I see them as recovery related. But what happens behind the scenes, people are working with friends that they've met who've been through the steps, and they do that very quietly on their own. It's not made to be a big deal. And you don't hear people talk about, like I used to always hear sitting in meetings, and people would talk about some drill sergeant sponsor who would make them do this or that. I don't hear that kind of thing at my group. So I feel like it's pretty healthy.
I agree. Some people in our group do sponsorship and have sponsors and do steps, and some of them don't. What I'm seeing more these days as well is people being more like, the peer-to-peer sponsoring, where it's not like a hierarchical, I am over you and you do what I say, but more of like for me, somebody would come to me because they know that I do the steps in a secular way. So they'd specifically seek me out for either advice or literature or some sort of thing regarding that. Whereas, if somebody else has been around a long time and maybe, they went through cancer and stayed sober. And so, this person either has that issue or a loved one or something like that, they might seek that person out to, kind of be a sponsor, friend, just to be close to during that time to help them walk through the experience that they are. So I feel like I'm seeing more of that rather than a lot of the
same here. Same here.
Sponsor.
And I've even seen people use the word mentor more often than sponsor.
Yeah.
Because that's really more what it's like. That word sponsor is kind of weird. And for people that don't know where it came from, at one time, it started in Cleveland. AA was growing by leaps and bounds because in the city of Cleveland because of a famous baseball player who got sober, and because the interest in AA was so great, the AA members were real careful about who they would bring to meetings. They had to make sure that they were really serious about getting sober. So you had to be sponsored in order to come into a group. You had to have someone vouch for you, or sponsor you. So that's how the word sponsor came about. And in Cleveland, they were working with the Big Book and stuff there. I think that was probably the first city where they did that because they didn't have Bill and Bob, and they had all these AA members together in one place. So that's kind of how sponsorship came about and the word sponsor. But it kind of gives you the idea that, I don't know, the word itself kind of bothers me, but I haven't observed any really dangerous stuff. Now, I know there's some really freaky sponsorship habits that happen in some of these Clancy cult-like groups, but for the most part, I haven't seen anything like really bad. But I've seen what I think like some heavy-handed sponsorship type practices that I don't think are appropriate, or people that feel like their sponsor knows best, like there's some authority figure. That kind of bothers me a little bit. Getting to the subject of the mental health thing, the only bad experience I personally had with sponsorship was early on. There's a history of mental illness in my family, depression, suicide, schizoaffective disorder, pretty serious stuff. I'm very fortunate that what I deal with is very moderate, I guess, or minimal. It's very treatable and manageable. But if I'm not being treated by a therapist, a psychiatrist, and medications, it can really be problematic. And I had a very, very difficult time during my first 2 years of sobriety dealing with depression. And I know a lot of that is kind of normal for anybody who stops drinking. You kind of go through that. But I think mine was a little bit more serious based upon my family history. And it would have been good for me to see a professional just to get checked out. But, I was discouraged from even doing that, and I don't understand to this day why somebody would do that. But I stupidly followed this person's advice and didn't seek help. And I did that for a long time, and my sobriety was a lot more difficult than it needed to be. I'm really fortunate that I lived through it, but I finally did break down. And I went to, the very first time I went to a therapist, I don't know, I was sober maybe 5 years, I don't know. And I went to this place that charged on a sliding scale because I didn't have a lot of money. And I met with this guy who had he was master's level social worker. And it was very, very helpful. It was the first time I ever talked to somebody who wasn't an alcoholic, and not specifically about alcoholism, but about underlying issues, that I was dealing with. And it was very helpful. From there, I went to group therapy. From there, I went to a psychiatrist, and that's what I do now. Is I see a psychiatrist, and I also do take antidepressant medication. And I've been doing that for a long time. It's made a tremendous difference for me. And I'm not saying that it's right for everybody or not, but it's right for me. Oh, we got a caller. Can I take this call?
Yeah, let's go.
I've been talking so much. Oh, hello.
Hello, this is Bobby C., a friend in recovery.
I should have guessed it was Bobby C. How are you, Bobby?
Hi, Bobby.
It's good to hear from you.
I'm fine. Hello, Angela. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm here and I'm sober.
All right. John,
Yes,
you
sir.
doing good?
I'm doing pretty good, Bobby. Yeah, I was telling Angela before we started today that it's allergy season, of course, and every time I get like a little cough, I get, oh my God, what's going on here? But no, I'm fine.
I can
I'm
relate.
fine.
I can relate to that. That me and my wife always kid each other when I sneeze. She says, "Oh no, you got it." No, I know this is some serious times, but we're going to get through this. Getting back to sponsorship, you know what? I was listening, and I loved everything everybody was saying, Angela and John, what you were talking about, and my sponsorship. When I came in, and sponsorship today is completely different. Completely different. I mean, well, but I evolved. I'm just a different type of a person, and I think different, and I really like the things that I'm hearing about. Like I don't like language or words or labels that don't empower me anymore. So I kind of try to stay away from certain language too. Like, even the language like alcoholic and addict. I don't even like them words today. It's crazy, but getting back to the sponsorship, the word sponsor, it reminds me of like a Masonic lodge layer. It's almost like the more that I get into different types of recovery, the more I see how somebody would actually look at it as cultish, in a sense. Because of first of all, for me to think that I could go to a sponsor and go through these steps and it's over. And sometimes I feel like we've given younger people false hope that they go through the steps. And I know it says step 10, continue to take personal inventory, but sometimes that's very hard. And for me, that took years and years and years and years. And so I kind of like that self-inquiry or self-inquiring about myself is very continuous. It's continuous. And what I'm learning today is that this practice is a 2,500-year-old practice. I mean, it's the practice of self-inquiring and self-knowledge and self-awareness is ancient. So it's really nothing new. It's nothing new. But the way I was sponsored, today I look at it and I speak about it today in a different light that I would have spoke about it maybe 10 years ago or maybe even 36 years ago when I first came in. It's completely different. But I was fortunate, and I think I mentioned this to you before, I was fortunate enough to have a sponsor in the beginning that was my friend in the beginning. He became my friend. He became my buddy. I hung out with him. I went places with him. And I was so lucky he was not a big book thumper. I was fortunate in that way. But I happened to be in the program, and I had to do the stuff that they were telling me because I thought I was going to die if I didn't, because in the book it said I surely would die. So eventually I had to seek out sponsors that were more traditional, sponsors that led me through the steps. I had to start talking about God and believing in the things that they told me I had to believe in, But through years and years and years and years, I evolved from that, Today, I like the idea that every one of us is our own guide in recovery, and in the beginning, I believe I like the word mentorship, but I really like the word friend.
Yeah, friend. It's almost can be a natural thing, Sponsor it can be a natural thing that happens sometimes. I've had a lot of good friends since I've been, in AA, and I don't know if we've ever had a formal sponsorship relationship, but my friendship with them they were close friendships and very beneficial and helpful to me. And some people see that as kind of like what it's all about anyway. There's a person in here writing about, why do the steps at all, and that's a good point. Not everybody has to do the damn steps. It's not that it's not like a requirement to do them. It's totally up to each individual person if they want to do that or not. That's how I'm experiencing it at my group. What about you, Angela? At your group, does it feel
right.
like people
in
feel
the
like,
in the rooms of secular AA, I think it's much more open to do them, don't do them. It's like I said, it's much more common to have people talk about what they learned from their therapist and what's helpful to them and books they're reading and things like that. So yeah, I think that it's not as big of a deal within the secular rooms, but I do, recall, and I've still attended some more traditional AA meetings where, that's what they think it is, that, if you don't, get a sponsor and do the steps and be of service, you're going to drink and die. And I think, that's part of the reason there's a lot of fear right now about not having face-to-face meetings is, if that's, what you're used to. And if that's part of the mindset you have that, if you don't do this, you're going to drink and die, then that'd be really scary. That'd make all the stuff going on right now extra scary. So yeah.
My observation though, with when I was going and just regular AA is that, and to a certain extent, I don't think it's that much different from a secular group, other than in secular groups, we're more open about whether or not we work the steps and have a sponsor. But I bet you, even you go to any AA meeting, the overwhelming talk might be have a sponsor, work the steps, all this stuff. But there are a lot of people that don't do that, and they're just very kind of quiet about it, because they don't want to go against that. Whereas the difference, I think, with our groups is that it's more accepted, I think, to say, no, I don't really have anything to do with the steps.
That's the beauty.
Yeah, you're right.
You
Bobby.
know what? That's the beauty. That's the beauty of what's going on right now. Not to interrupt you, Angela, but the beauty of what's happening with this secular community is that freedom. It's the freedom to choose. And I'm gonna let you guys go.
Okay,
I don't
we got
believe in
another
codify on things.
We got another caller, Bobby. I can't believe it. But hey, thank you for calling.
Okay, take care now, guys.
Bye-bye. Let's see who this is. Hello.
Hey, John. It's Jackie.
Oh, hey, Jackie. How you doing?
Jackie. I'm good. Hey, Angela. How you doing?
Hello. Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. I love listening to you guys. And yeah, I can just so relate to all of this. And it was funny when Angela was saying about how people get so afraid that if they don't work the steps or they don't do everything right, they're going to die. But oh my gosh, I think those of us who've been around or drink or die or whatever. But I think those of us who've been around long enough see people who go to meetings all the time and do the steps and they get drunk or high or die, I mean, and I think it does go back to, John, I can always relate to what you talk about, like having issues other than alcohol. And if you don't treat that, man, I just don't think you got a shot, I came in and was just a mess once I took the drugs and alcohol out of me. I really needed help. And yeah, people said you shouldn't see a therapist for a whole year.
God, they told you that? They told you that, Jackie? You were told that too?
Yeah.
Wow. Man.
Yeah. I didn't listen, thank God. I really don't think I would have made it if I had waited.
Yeah. That still happens. My doctor told me that she still has patients to this day who will come in and say and tell her that people in AA told them not to seek help. I just can't believe that still happens.
Yeah. I can't either. And then I wanted to comment on the Alternative 12-Step book. I like it. I mean, it is definitely spiritual at the beginning. And what I have done more recently is take people with a bunch of years of recovery who went through maybe the regular steps, and they're not all completely atheists. They just don't really believe in a God like most people would think of a God. And I find it to be almost like recovery 2.0. It's almost like emotional recovery, this book. I don't know. I just feel like it goes beyond the not drinking. It just seems broader. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, It definitely does
Yeah,
to me.
yeah.
That's, one of the things that I liked about it, because, I don't claim to only be dysfunctional with alcohol. I have lots of different things that I'm dysfunctional in. I don't, specialize in one. And so this book, addresses, that from more of the emotional and mental health kind of aspect. And that's what I liked about it.
Yeah. And I don't know how I would even take somebody with a bunch of years through the steps, who's already been through the steps and who doesn't really struggle with alcohol. Like they just don't, it just doesn't seem to fit, Yeah. So I love that we're living in a world where we have all these alternatives, and we can continue looking at ourselves and growing and changing. And I'm so happy I stumbled upon, Beyond Belief podcast. And, and it's actually been kind of cool during this pandemic, although I'm hearing you guys, so I had a really tough week. But I've been going to some secular meetings online, all over the place, and it's been pretty cool. So.
Yeah, a lot of people have been doing that. In fact, we had 2 people from out of the state come to our meeting, our KC meeting. One was from North Carolina, the other was from South Carolina. And the woman from South Carolina said that she actually went to the meeting, the Boise online meeting, and she said it was huge. So that means our online meetings have been pretty small, but she said the Boise meeting was really good. You have to check that one out.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I've heard it's pretty good. To be honest,
I don't even know what state I was in. I came in a few minutes late. I was like, I don't even know where I am, but this is so cool. And people were from all over. It was pretty amazing. So, and I got the link off your Facebook page, Sean, the AA Beyond Belief Facebook page. So yeah, it's been really helpful.
Well, Jackie, I have to tell you.
All right, guys. Well, thanks.
Jackie and I recorded a podcast like 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think, maybe even longer. Gosh, it's hard to believe. But anyway, it's about the power of the pause. And it was a wonderful podcast. And I've got the recording saved, Jackie, and your audio is perfect. My audio is crappy. The perfect audio that I had was saved on a portable hard drive, which I can't access. So I have to redo that podcast in a way. Yeah, what I'm going to do, your audio is perfect. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to re-record my part, it's good. So I don't know how it's going to be. I'm going to do it like sort of like an MP. It might be like an NPR type of a storyboard.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
I'm definitely listening to that.
We could do it again. I thought about that. I've never had to ask anyone if they'd do it again.
I'd be willing to do that.
Okay, we might do that.
Let me know.
All right. Okay.
That's hilarious. God knows what you're going to say. I'm using the word God. Oh,
there you go.
Oh boy.
Right.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I found that I'm more religious in the last, since 2016. I say Jesus Christ and, what the fuck, all the languages, that sound religious but are swear words, in the last few years. So I've become much more religious, is what I claim. Yeah.
Last night I was sitting here with my husband, and I was trying to get onto some website, and I couldn't remember my password. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I changed this password so many times. And I'm like, hey, that's an excellent password, Jesus Christ. So yeah, it comes in handy. Gosh, it's so good to talk to you, Angela. I mean, I've talked to John before, and I really like him, but I think I mentioned when John and I were talking how much you have helped me. I love the way you talk about working the steps. And when you hear people, I hope I'm paraphrasing okay. When you hear people talk about like asking God for help, you always listen to the action after that, because it's the action after that that's so important. And that has helped me so much. And it's helped me to help others who are, struggling with the God language and the God concepts in recovery. So it's great to have the opportunity. Thank you for that. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll get back with you, Jackie. We will reschedule. We'll do a do-over on that one.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Take care, guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
You well. Too.
Bye.
And we have another call. I'm going to go ahead and take it.
Okay.
This is exciting. Hello.
Oh, hi.
How are you?
Hi. I'm calling from Austin, Texas. My name is Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
I expect there to be like a long line. So I noticed the topic was sponsorship and secular A meetings. And I just created about a month and a half ago a secular A meeting at my young people's sober living down in Austin, and we, just like the previous caller talked about, we've been having trouble like figuring out what it means to like approve or disapprove of sponsorship as a rule in a secular A meeting, or if we should even take a position on that. And I think as a young people's meeting especially, it's odd because I don't meet a lot of secular AA young people. I was wondering, like, if you have, because I've listened to a lot of Beyond Belief and like I haven't really heard it. It's sort of a niche topic. Yeah, so I was just wondering what y'all thought about that. It's great to be on. Big fan.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for calling. That was really nice. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah. I can speak to that, that our meeting has, quite a few young people in it, people who, and I would probably classify that as, under 35, quite a few people in their 20s, that are coming in. They come in because they Google secular or atheist or, something along that lines, AA, and they find us that way. Some of them do, sponsorship. Some of them take advantage of that. Some of them are doing things outside and going through different kinds of rehab, part-time rehab, things like that. And so it's kind of a mixture, and our group doesn't take a stand on that you need to have a sponsor and you need to do this. We get together and talk about staying sober and the different stuff that we do, and we bring in all sorts of stuff on that. So there's some people that are, secular Buddhists, and there are people that are straight up atheists, and everything in between. Yeah, I don't know if your group, needs to, make some sort of group conscience on it or not. Ours never has, and it seemed to work out okay. We've been going for 12 years now. And so, that's my thoughts on both, the young people in AA and the sponsorship. The other thing I would add is that I think too, there are not a lot, but there are more opportunities for sobriety now, different programs, Smart Recovery, and more outpatient places. And so I think that's some of why a lot of meetings don't have as many young people in them, because more young people are, secular, according to Pew Research. And so they don't even give AA a shot if they can avoid it. So those are my thoughts.
I was there for a while. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
How about you, John?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I was kind of spacing out a little bit. I was actually watching some of the people in the chat on YouTube. I had to throw one guy kind of out. I'm sorry, and he's going to give me a hard time about it. But he's really a troll. I'm sorry. That guy. His name is Secular AA Coffee Shop, but anyway, he's not really Secular AA Coffee Shop. Anyway, I had to throw him out, and that's why I was kind of diverted. But no, I heard a little bit. I just don't think that, sponsorship is and working the steps and all that kind of stuff is really an individual practice. I think a lot of new people that come into the program, they want some structure, and a certain amount of structure is good. I think I needed that, and it was very helpful. And then as I kind of progressed, I maybe needed a little bit less structure. And, all people are a little bit different. So what I've noticed at my home group are, the people that are working with sponsors and going through the steps. It's kind of like a more personal thing. It's just between them and the person they're working with. And it's really not a big deal. So. Yeah.
My girlfriend has a question.
No, it's okay. I just want to say I'm a fan too. I'm listening, and
my boyfriend kind of converted me to the more secular path, and I'm listening and I agree with everything you're saying, but I think because we're both, like early 20s and we're in recovery, it feels like whenever I tell people that I don't want to have a sponsor, I keep hearing people say, that's your disease talking, and stuff like that. I know. And so it's hard. I really enjoy listening, and I've been voraciously listening to your podcast since we've been quarantined. And I guess I really thought that it was my disease talking until I listened to your podcast, and so I wasn't incredulous until I thought it was my boyfriend's disease talking until I listened to your podcast. Like, what is the secular perspective on this disease having a voice like that people are giving me, older people who I guess have an AA background? I'm sorry I don't mean to piggyback on him.
That's fine. I can't say that there's an overall secular view on anything. But I think for my personal view, and I think most people would agree on this, the whole, that's your disease talking to you. Personally, I don't think it's intentional on the other person's part, but it's kind of like a controlling behavior. It's kind of like almost a shaming behavior that, how dare you think for yourself? How dare you do something different? I think there would be a kinder, gentler way to help someone with that. Just be the person's friend, for Christ's sakes. I think that would be nice, a nicer way of doing that. If you think the person needs a sponsor so bad, just be the person's friend.
Right.
Jeez.
And it kind of goes along the lines of the people who say that your disease is in the background doing push-ups and stuff. And I don't care. Yeah, I don't care for that, because that makes it. Yeah, it makes it feel like, I'm in a battle with, part of me. And what my journey has shown me is that I need to get in better touch with my true self, the one that within me that's, that's wise, that has answers and stuff. I need to learn more about, addiction or, chemical dependence or whatever you want to call it. But in my experience, that kind of me against my disease type of a thing, doesn't work out. For me, alcohol was a way that I was trying to cope with life. It was a tool. It was, something that my brain, latched onto as, hey, this will help, this will help calm your fears. This will make you social. This will, whatever. So it was a helping thing that my mind was trying to do with alcohol. It just didn't work out very well. And so, so by understanding that a little bit more, it really released any sort of battle within me. And so then I didn't have to have this, always be on alert, because I could pick up a drink at any moment. It was more of okay, that's something that part of my mind may always, point out that, oh, you could have a drink. But as I developed my sense of self better, I have other parts of me that remind me that, that's probably not that helpful. Maybe you should go for a walk, maybe you should call somebody on the phone. Maybe you should look at this and that. And so it's less of that battle thing, and it's more of an awareness that that's back there. It's, it's one of my options. It always will be. But it's not the healthiest option. And now I have a lot of healthier ones that I can choose from.
You guys sound like you're a lot better place than I was. I was in my 20s also when I was first getting sober, and people would say stuff like that to me, and it would cause me to doubt myself. It really did. And I'm not proud of this, but this is the way I behaved. I doubted myself, and I just said, well, they must be right, and that's not really healthy. So I'm glad that you're not thinking like that, because that what they're doing is not healthy. I don't think that they mean it intentionally. I think they think they're helping, but
yeah. And sometimes it's just the parroting stuff.
Yeah.
They just parrot what other people have said to them. And
yeah.
And same with the principles. If you ask somebody who may be in AA for, 10 or 15 years, what are the principles of, step 4? They may not know what you're talking about. They may tell you how you're supposed to do step 4, but they don't know the principles behind them. And so I think in a lot of this talk of, that's your disease talking, or the disease doing push-ups, things like that, it's just parroting that people have heard. And most of the time they don't mean it negatively. So I think it's, one of the things on the coins that I don't know if you do there, but that we do here, it says to thine own self be true. And so oftentimes I've taken that, and I did that in early sobriety as, being really like my mantra. So, when people said stuff like that to me, it's like, no, you can still question. You can question everything. I mean, they can't kick you out of AA. You can be kicked out of a meeting, but they can't technically kick you out of AA. And so, yeah, I was a pain in the ass for quite a few people for, first few years. But yeah, I'd say, keep questioning and asking questions, and take the stuff that's useful for you, and look up other stuff, if you're not sure, what somebody's saying, if it's helpful or not.
Yeah, thank you. It makes me think, like John said, just be their friend. It's like, it's so true. I feel like I've had longer standing quote unquote friendships with people who have just been wanting to sponsor me, and then the friendship falls apart when they are like, well, I'm your sponsor and we can't be friends. And so that's kind of a bummer. But thank you so much for hearing us and talking to us.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it was great to call in. All right.
Awesome. Thank you for listening.
Good work. All
Thanks.
Right.
And definitely keep in touch and let us know how your group is doing. I don't know of that many young people groups that are secular, and so I'd love to hear, how you guys are doing, and if there's anything that some of us can do to help you guys out. So.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. It's fun having all these callers. It's really made this podcast go a lot quicker and a lot easier. I really appreciate that. So nice to see so many people sticking in there and watching the live stream. So Angela, did I touch I started talking a little bit about the mental health side of things and my experience with it, where I was kind of discouraged from seeking help and kind of delayed it. What's been your experience with that, and how do you deal with it now?
Yeah. I don't feel like I was particularly discouraged by anyone. There were some meetings that I attended where people would share, their experience of that they were, basically schizophrenic and on the edge when they came in, and all this crazy stuff that they do. And then they came in and got God and did the steps, and, or I guess the other way around, did the steps, got God. And now they're perfectly, normal human beings. And, I always question when anybody claims to be perfectly normal. And so there was some of that. And before I had come into AA, in my younger years and in my 20s, I, suffered from depression and anxiety and stuff, mainly depression, and was a compulsive overeater and that. And then I thought that, that I was fine, after I had gastric bypass surgery, that I didn't need, anything anymore, any sort of medications. And then I did, got into alcohol to cope and to numb. And then after I let go of the alcohol, I still didn't go see a counselor or anything for probably my first year. And then it was like after my first year when, things were still not going well and felt like they were getting worse, that I started going to counseling again and seeking out help for my depression. And that's, what I do off and on now as well as seek out different counseling things, different types and modalities. There's a lot of different kinds of counseling right now that you can get. I think the steps are mostly cognitive behavioral therapy, just in a different package. And so that's why they can be so helpful to so many different people. But I like the internal family systems therapy, which is, what is it? Self leadership, and then there's the emotional family therapy. There's a lot of stuff out there right now that we can take advantage of, and I think that's helpful and that's good, and that we should be encouraging it. And I continue to seek out new ways. I'm really into studying trauma now, and my mom teases me because I have all of these books, and it looks like I should be, a trauma therapist, but it's my hobby. And she's like, great, I raised a daughter whose hobby is trauma. But yeah, I like to learn about, all of these different things. And I love it when I hear people in the rooms that are, checking out different things as well, because, for the majority of us, alcohol isn't our only problem. And I don't think that we should be relying on sponsors as our only source of perspective, of guidance and stuff. I really do think it's more of a friendship thing. And that's how most of my relationships with people that I've sponsored have gone, is that, we've become friends. And so now it's just kind of a peer friendship sponsorship thing. I can call them about things, they call me about things. And, there's not that, hierarchy or anything.
We have another caller. Let's take it.
Hey, sounds good.
Hello.
Hey, good day, John. Doug
Hello.
P. from Canada.
Who's this from Canada?
And hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
I didn't catch your first name. Which?
Oh, Doug.
Doug. Oh, I'll be dang. I thought that you shipped out somewhere.
Yes. I'm in the middle of isolation first for doing this. So yeah, that's going to happen soon.
Okay.
So
All
anyway,
right.
yeah. So love the show. Love the.
What was your idea?
Lots of opinions. Yeah. Thank you. I missed part of it, and I quickly went off on one online meeting, and I jumped in here, and I missed a little bit of it. But yeah, it was great hearing the discussion. From myself, it was an evolving process. Like, I had a traditional sponsor, and I went through the steps with him, and and then after a number of years, I became that traditional sponsor. And then once I got into secular AA, it was just slowly, as you and I talked, it was like a little deprogramming, and eventually I was deprogramming myself out of that traditional sponsor role, right? And because I didn't believe a lot of the stuff that that I was taught and what I was doing, for a number of years. And so now there's a lot of new possibilities, and a lot of it's just letting go of a lot of learned stuff, and just becoming friends with the other person and listen to the other person, rather than having a mandated program or walking through something, So yeah, and Angela, I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself to Angela. I heard many of your podcasts. Love the steps you were doing with John, and really enjoy having you on the show.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Bobby, not Bobby, but Doug, when you emailed me, you made me think a little bit. I don't know how I come across when I talk about sponsorship. I'm not anti-sponsorship. I just I think it's good. What I see happening at my home group, if that's what sponsorship is everywhere, I think it's great. Go for it. But I think we do need to be careful with it, because there is that dynamic of power, that one person has more power over the other, and you have to be really respectful about that and careful about that. And I think it can be abused and has been abused, but I don't think that that's the majority experience, but I think that it can happen. It's just something to be careful about. So that's my only feeling about it,
Yeah. And I think that we talk about it more in secular AA than they do in traditional AA. I don't know that I've heard very much in more of the traditional rooms of, being careful about selecting sponsorship, what is and isn't okay, and things like that. It's just not talked about as much. But in secular AA, because we're open to talk about just about everything, then, there's, I think, more awareness about it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a diverse crowd in the meeting that I'm at, and so we have people from traditional AA visiting us, and we also have people in secular AA that don't go to traditional, and so a lot of mixture of people and diverse ideas on the topic. But I shared with John, like myself, it was an evolving process for me, and I changed a lot of how I've done things with Sponsee. So I asked John in an email, does it exist? And if so, let's have a discussion. What does it exist? And basically, it means a lot of different things, a lot of different people. But I think the main thing that I got out of this is that we're on structuring it, right? And we're becoming more one-on-one rather than the sponsee, level, as you were describing earlier, John.
Yeah, I think there's a lot less rigidity, or at least that's what we're trying to move to. But it is true that some of us who went to more traditional meetings or got sober in a traditional way, that some of the language and stuff that we still use, we don't always recognize that it's still coming from that. And so that's one of the things I've been working on, is trying to recognize what language I'm using, and is it appropriate for secular AA. One of the good things is that when I'm at a traditional meeting, I can translate, for them, so that they're hearing some of their same stuff, but in a secular way. But I don't necessarily want to take some of that language into my secular meetings and stuff, because it wasn't necessarily helpful to me. It's just that's what I heard, and it sticks in my brain, just like some of the swear words and stuff that that sounds spiritual in nature. It's just what comes up into my brain from so many years. Anyway.
No, absolutely. Well, thanks for putting that on. It was a wonderful discussion. Good to see lots of people watching and talking about it. So,
yeah, well, thank you for calling, Doug, and you take care and be safe. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for the topic,
we
Doug.
will.
Okay.
Thank you. Goodbye.
So, Angela, Tracy R. from South Carolina, she's the one that was at our meeting in Kansas City. She's in our chat room listening to the podcast, and she is the one that went to the Boise online meeting and really liked it.
Yes. Yeah, I remember.
You? Well, tell me about your online meetings. How are they going?
They're going well. So the Tuesday meeting is the one that tends to get more people, and so I'm guessing that it was not last Tuesday, but the Tuesday before, I believe. They're doing really well. We started doing them on Thursday as well, which hasn't been anything we've ever done in the regular meeting. But several people in our home group asked if we could do another one during the week, because of the situation that we're in and needing more secular support, and so we did that, and so we're doing them Tuesdays and Thursdays now. And our Thursday meeting sometimes tends to be both almost half and half of Boise people and Cleveland people, because one of our members is an actor, and he works in his home base is in Boise, and then during the winter months he works in Cleveland, and so he has a sponsor there and goes to meetings there. And so they have, secular meetings there as well. And so he invited them to our online. And so, it's kind of interesting. We're all, we've decided that we're going to keep Thursdays as, well, we haven't decided for sure. We have to do a group conscience, but most of us feel that it would be good to keep the Thursday meeting, an online meeting, after we're able to, move about and do face-to-face meetings again. We'll do our Tuesday face-to-face and Thursday online, just because we're creating a community of people. Another person who lives in Idaho, but further away from us, and doesn't have any secular meetings, she was super excited to find we were online. And so, so now she wants to be a part of that Thursday group that continues on as well. So,
our
it's
online
going
meetings have been kind of small. I think at the most we may have had up to 15 people maybe at one meeting. I don't know, but most of them have been pretty small. We've even had as few as maybe just 3 people at a meeting. So they've not taken off like that well. When we first started, my group was kind of reluctant to stop meeting in person. Okay. So we shut down our Friday meeting, but they still wanted to have all the other meetings. So we figured, okay, as long as the church lets you meet, okay, let's go ahead and do it. But finally, we got to the point where we set up these online meetings, but we were still having the in-person meetings. And the first time that we had an online meeting, what we did is we mixed it with the live meeting, and it was kind of fun actually, because what they did and the people in the room, they would pass around this iPad or whatever. So you felt like you were seeing everybody. Okay. Chloe wants the link to your meetings, Angela. So you need to do that.
Oh, okay.
Give it to her.
Can I do it like after?
Yeah.
We close
so
out?
After we close down the podcast, Chloe, Angela will put the link to her meetings in the chat here or the comment section of this of the
I don't have it memorized, and so
Yeah.
I will go cut and paste it.
So, but are your meetings listed where people find them? How are people finding
our meetings?
you?
Yeah, our meetings listed with the area website and with our local central office / intergroup. And so I haven't posted them to the larger groups or anything yet, because because I needed to learn how to do them well and try to keep them safe and things like that. So they haven't been widely distributed around yet.
Well, it's interesting, this whole thing about Zoom bombing now, that it's like Josie calls it like the modern day crank call, which is basically
right. Yes. Yeah. Well, like I said, in the beginning, when I set mine up, I was, very strict on everything. No, if you're setting up, meetings right now, anyone out there, make sure you go into the settings before you ever start, the meeting, and make sure that you've turned off file sharing and screen sharing and all of that stuff. It's good to set up a waiting room if you can, and to get co-hosts so that one person can be handling, the waiting room and vetting people and stuff while, the other person leads the meeting or something. But yeah, I set up a lot of really strict stuff on ours, so we haven't had a problem with that. Hopefully we don't. We'll see what happens with it. But I think people are learning and they're setting up, more things and more trainings and stuff. So we'll see how things go.
Well, can you believe we've gone over an hour now? It's almost, I guess, about time to shut down. I will read one more comment, though, that came from Carolyn. It's very nice. She says, "Thank you for having us on the phone. I think I started realizing I should notice the questioning voice in my head when I noticed I had been staying sober despite not being connected with a higher power." Yes. Or listen to the questioning voice. Yes. Should listen to the questioning voice. Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, definitely.
So, hey, everybody, thank you so much. It's so cool to have all these callers and people in the chat room on YouTube. It was even fun having the troll guy. It was just a really nice experience. So thank you so much. I hear people say, and it's really true, we're all in this together. That virus thing doesn't know any boundaries, no matter what someone might think. We're all in this together, AA people and non-AA people alike. But especially as AA people, it's been an interesting time for us because, social connection is what has helped us stay sober. And now we're finding new ways and different ways of connecting, which is really interesting. So,
yeah. And if you have a question or a topic that you would like us to talk about, feel free to email and let us know. I wasn't too sure about the sponsorship one today when John first mentioned it to me. I'm like, didn't we kind of already talk about this for 12 hours? I know. Then I thought about it. I'm like, well, actually, probably would be really good to talk about it a little bit more with, so many new people finding secular AA and prioritizing the mental health part, reminding people that we're not professionals, and so it's important to seek outside help to help you with those things as well.
All right, here we go. Is this right? Yeah. Oh, I didn't do the right one. There we go. Oh, it's really confusing. There are so many buttons on this complicated machine. And I didn't go to school to learn how to do this. I just had to teach myself. So, Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Doug, and gosh, who else called in? Everybody who called in, and thank you for everybody who listened. Thank you, Mr. Troll, for your comments. It was a lot of fun. We'll be back again next Friday as we continue these live streams.
Distancing.
Yeah, so sober distancing. All right, y'all take care. Be well. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.